This is Polish Peter, and welcome to episode 74 of Immigrant Masters Unite. Hey guys, it's Polish Peter from Immigrant Masters Unite, and welcome to another episode. On this particular episode, I have a really amazing guest. His name is Andrew Samuel, and we're going to touch more about his bio. But here is why I want you guys to listen to this particular episode is because Andrew literally came from nothing to a point where he was, as a kid, was sleeping on a floor lined with cow dung. Okay. And we're going to talk a little bit about that and why it's important for his success on this particular episode, up to being a CEO, president, and the chairman of a very successful bank here in the United States. He's originally from India, and I just love what Andrew had to share on this particular episode. We talked about how that cow dung is actually part of his story and why it's so important to his story, right? What it means to be successful, and how money alone, when you make it as a goal, is not actually going to get you what you really want, right? Why having a big, hairy goal is very important to your success and to create that successful life that you really want and want. You know, Andrew actually shared his big, hairy goal and the reasons behind it and how he is actually going after that particular goal to actually reach it. I believe he's going to do it. We talked about the top talents to help you succeed in life, desire, focus, and what it actually means. How is he actually uses it in his life? He actually shared several examples of how he actually uses this, plus much more. So listen, guys, I really implore you to listen to this particular episode, take lots of notes, and actually incorporate the stuff that you are hearing in those particular episodes. So without further ado, here is Andrew Samuel from India. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another amazing episode of Immigrant Masters Unite, where immigrants unite and transform lives. That's right. This podcast is all about helping you transform your life, your business, and the world around you. And I'm your host, Polish Peter. Now, you may or may not be an immigrant, and that's perfectly fine. However, on this particular show, on this particular podcast, here's what I get to do, guys, and I just love it. I get to talk to, dissect, strategize, and get into the minds of some powerful immigrants who came to this country, sometimes literally starting from nothing, and created a powerful, impactful life for themselves. And this is one of those episodes because I have a guest here that I'm so excited about. His name is Andrew Samuel, and he is originally from India. And today, Samuel is a chairman, chief executive officer, and director of LinkBank Corp and LinkBank, which started in 2018. His career has been just unbelievable. It sounds like, Forbes 500 list. I'm just reading this list. He's been president. He's been chief executive officer. He's been chairman of different boards from different banks and, financial institutions, dating all the way back to 1984, including, Wake Up Financial, Sovereign Bank, Fulton Bank, Commonwealth National Bank, and so many others. And guess what? He started literally from nothing. And when I mean nothing, he was living on, I'll let him share his story. But one important thing is he has a bachelor's degree in a university. And that's a really important aspect of it, I think, because I think some people in this country feel like I need to have all of these different, degrees and all that kind of stuff to be successful. So, and I think we're going to talk about on this particular episode on this. So first and foremost, Andrew, thank you so much for being on this podcast. Tell us a little bit of your story of where you came from and how you actually got here to States.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. I appreciate that very much. So, I'm of Indian origin. I was born on the northern part of India, just below the Himalayas, and I'm one of four siblings. My father was a military man, served in the Indian Army, fought in 2 wars with Pakistan, and so most of the year he was gone. So my mom actually raised us as a single parent. When I was about 6, we 7 years old. My father was fortunate that he got a contract to work in Zambia, Africa. So we actually moved the whole family from India to Africa, and I spent the next 11 years going to high school there, graduating. And when I was 17, I was fortunate enough to come to a small community college, a small Christian college in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, as a freshman. That was in 1980 when I was 17. So I showed up with one suitcase, and the college was kind enough to say, listen, get yourself over here. We'll put you through work study. We'll give you opportunities to earn enough money to get your way through college. So I'm eternally grateful to the college for taking a chance on me. I met my wife at Messiah. We've been married 36 years. We have 5 daughters. We have 12 grandchildren, and we've been awfully blessed. And, our journey together has been phenomenal. And I've been, fortunate enough to have so many opportunities that I know I would not have had in my own native land in the same way that I've had here. Here I've had the opportunity to apply myself and do whatever I need to, as long as I set, big, audacious goals and went after them. Whereas I know in India, I would have had to have the right name, the right connections, the right pedigree. Otherwise, there was a ceiling as to what I could accomplish. So that's how I got to the country.
Well, listen, thank you for sharing that story, because a couple of things that I'm hearing from you sharing this is, one is your outlook on life and your outlook and view on, your self being in this life. Because one thing that I've heard you say, I was fortunate enough. I was, grateful for this. And that is, I think, a big part of successful immigrants that I've been speaking to is the being grateful and looking at life from being fortunate. Because granted, listen, the fact that the university, I think, asked you to come in there, they had to have seen something in you to be able to bring you in there, because not everybody makes it into the universities, right?
That's
but
right.
Yet you still have that attitude of being grateful and fortunate. So that's my view. Do you believe that's a big part of your success?
Absolutely. And Peter, I don't want to jump ahead, but in the book, Our American Dream, there's a couple of different chapters. There's a chapter on humility, why it's so important to be humble in all of our dealings, to show humility. There's a chapter on serving and the desire to want to serve others before needing to be served. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so to me, there's a piece on your purpose. Your purpose can't be just about making money and about fulfillment, etc. There's got to be a greater purpose in everything that you do. And so all of those things are really tied to what I am so grateful for, the opportunities that I've had, you know what I mean? And I know a big part of that has helped me to be more humble and to have a spirit of serving.
Right. And I think I agree with that, because, granted, we are talking about your book here. It's called Our American Dream. And we're going to mention, I'll give it a link actually at the end of this podcast to people too, if they want to grab it, to take a look at it. But it is, I think, very important. The purpose, right?
Yeah.
The purpose, why do you think it's so important to, one, have the purpose, and two, have the purpose that is bigger than you, that's not just about you or not just about money, right? Because I think a lot of people, they look at this goal that I want to make $1 million, let's say, right?
Right.
Yeah, but why do you think it's the other way around? Like the purpose was about others,
Right. So Peter, that's it's a very good question. So I'll give you an example. Every bank that I have started or been part of, our mission statement has been to positively impact people's lives. And by that, what we mean is you don't have to be a customer. Anytime you were in interaction with us, whether it was online, in person, etc., we wanted to have a positive impact on you. We wanted you to walk away saying, I'm a better person for having interacted with these folks.
Right.
If somebody says that again, and I'll give you an example. If the UPS guy that's doing the delivery every day to the bank feels like this is his favorite stop because we smile, we chat with him, we ask him about his kids, we offer him a cup of coffee, etc. If he says this is my favorite stop, pretty soon you can say to him, hey, by the way, if you like us so much, why don't you do business with us? He's not going to say no, you know what I mean,
Right.
in that scenario. So the purpose is very important, because if the purpose is purely to make money, to make $1 million, I can tell you, you're going to make $1 million and you're going to be looking around because there's still an unfulfilled, hollow feeling of, hey, what's next then?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like 10 million, 100 million. Where does it stop?
Right.
On the other hand, if it is in the process of fulfilling your purpose, you end up making money, so be it, But the whole purpose of like ours of positive living, impacting people's lives, has so much impact in communities, in states, in nations. If we can have that kind of impact, it just kind of spreads throughout your community. It makes
Yes.
it has an impact on the community, and that's what's truly rewarding. That is not as hollow a feeling as just having an ambitious financial goal.
Right. I love it the way you shared it, because having that positive impact that you were talking about, one important aspect I want you guys to take away from what you just shared, because I think, and if you're an entrepreneur, if you're in that community, you probably hear that quite often. But I think the big difference what you just shared is not just about having it with your clients.
Right.
It's about having it within your company.
Mm-hmm.
So when you build that culture, right? And having it with anyone and everyone you interacted with throughout the day. And that is a huge difference, because that's how, I imagine that a lot of your business growth and success was getting the clients into your, banks came from referrals probably, right?
Oh, absolutely. Because if people enjoy being around you and they know that you're not just about pushing them products, that you genuinely care about them as individuals and you want to have that impact on them, they're going to tell people openly about it. You know what I mean? And that's what we talk about at the company. We need to have passionate, raving employees, because that leads to passionate, raving customers. You know what I mean?
Right. So how did you incorporate it into your employees? That starts with the interview.
Yes. So one of the things, every company that I've been at, we usually have more than one. We usually have a chief culture officer, and I usually tell them, listen, your job description is to make sure that our values of integrity, honesty, having fun, doing the right thing, giving back, serving, all those become a reality. Mm-hmm. And so your job is to make sure that the DNA of our company, which is all those things, is intact. That means, who do we hire? How do we manage them? All of those things, you've got to make it a reality. And you can't just put it on a wall and say, we stand for this, and it gets done. So you've got to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And so we have, weekly meetings, we have monthly meetings, we have quarterly meetings, where the message of the company is constantly repeated again and again. Ultimately, you've got to make sure that the top of the house is displaying those things in tangible ways every day, in and out. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that starts with me making sure that I'm displaying those values, and that means our leadership team is, and then the employees will. So.
I love it. I think because this is really important, guys. So I hope you guys are listening to this particular, segment, because there's so much gold in here, because a couple of things that I take away from this is, one, you actually have a position in your company. It's called Chief Cultural Officer.
Yeah.
Most of the time, you don't see that in companies, and his sole job is to basically create the culture that you guys have put together and make sure that this culture is protected and not, altered in some other way, but some, outside forces or an employee that comes in and all of a sudden he starts, taking the culture down, right? Because there might be a naysayer or someone who's trying to have a negative impact. So that's one big thing. And second thing I hear, it starts from top. It always starts from top. And this is, those of you who have been listening to my podcast, you guys know that I'm a coach and I'm a transformation coach. I, work with immigrants. And in order for me to expect certain things from them, I need to be that myself first.
Yep.
If I want them to be on time, for instance, on all my calls and at the retreats, I have to make sure that I'm on time. And that is a huge thing, because there are some companies, I think, that they expect certain things from employees, but then the CEO or the president feels like he's better than that, right?
Yep. Absolutely. Yes,
right. So that's the first big thing I think that we need to embody it. And it doesn't matter what business you're in, really.
Right. That's right.
And the second thing I think that's important, which you kind of mentioned at the beginning of this call, is about the desire and the focus, right? Yep. So let's talk about the desire for a minute, because I think a lot of people, they go into business that they want to make that certain money, right? And there is really, the only desire is the monetary. And that's what you mentioned earlier. You make that and then you're not fulfilled. So how important, let me ask you this. What was your desire for starting the banks and start working with these banks?
Yeah. So a couple of things there, So as you know, I grew up in a very, very poor environment, and I share in our book, we essentially slept on dirt floors. I mean, there were 16 of us in a 14 by 14 room. We cooked, slept there, no indoor plumbing, so everything was outside. And, it was a dirt floor. But the dirt, if you sleep on a dirt floor, the dirt seems to stick on you, it rises, etc. So what we used to do is we used to actually smear cow dung over the dirt floor, because when cow dung dries, it seals the dirt. And so when you lie down to sleep, you don't get dirt on yourself because it's been sealed by the cow dung.
Are you serious?
Seriously. Okay. And
holy cow.
So,
shivers. Just listen.
Yeah, so that was the environment. We worried about would we have a meal to eat, and that's why we found ways to make money so that we could have one meal a day. So there was that desire, So as I finished my education, one of the things that was always a driver for me was knowing where I came from, okay, and wanting to make sure that my children had a better quality of life than I did. You know what I mean? And that was very important. But also from my experiences, I also knew the power of a simple smile, a helping hand, etc. Because when we were in those scenarios, I remember every little generous gesture anybody made. You know what I mean? But that kind of carried over. So as I got into my career and started to build on that, I kind of said to myself, I've got to keep those things intact, because I've got to give back those things that I felt like I got that were a source of motivation, So a lot of my desire really came from the fact that, I knew what it was like not to have a meal. And therefore, I never wanted my children to feel that way. So the desire to apply myself, to work hard, do whatever in a nation where I knew there was no ceiling for me. I could do whatever I wanted. That's the desire that propelled me to say that I can dream about being a vice president. I can dream about being an executive. I can dream about being a chairman, and it's really up to me to apply myself to get there. And that's kind of what has driven me, the last 40 years since my school days.
Wow. That is, I mean, listening to, I just got shivers just listening to you sharing that story that you've used cow dung to protect you from dirt. That blows my mind. And I think you mentioned before we got on the call that you actually used to sell it. So
So
share a little bit about that.
So, one of the beauty is, as I said, there were 16 of us in a 14 by 14 room, and so we lived with my mother, my uncles, my aunts, because in India it's the extended family system where families live together,
right?
And because you pool your resources so that everybody has a little bit and can survive,
right? Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that my uncles and my mom and I used to do is cow dung is very important in poverty-driven areas, and the reason is to seal the floor, you needed the cow dung. So we would actually, as children, follow cattle because in India, cattle are sacred. So there's cows roaming everywhere. So we would actually follow cows, and as soon as they did their business, we would all rush and fight over the dung, and we would carry it back to our house. When we got to our house, we would then use some of it to seal our floor. But then keep in mind, we had neighbors who wanted to seal their floors too, so we would sell some to them. The other thing about cow dung is when cow dung is made into patties and dried and fully dried, it burns as well as firewood does.
Wow.
And we didn't have much firewood around where we were, so we would make cow dung patties and we would sell cow dung patties because everybody cooked on an open fire. So we would sell them the cow dung patties that they would use to create their fires to be able to cook. It had two uses: was spearing over the floor and to use as cow dung patties that could be used in the fire. But at that young age, our uncles and aunts taught us how to be resourceful and find ways to make money. So not only did we collect cow dung and sell, we collected twigs and anything we could find to sell. It was just part of our nature. Is if you have this pain in your stomach, that's a hunger pain. How do you satisfy that? It allowed us to be really creative and entrepreneurial in finding ways to make money.
Right. And I love that because here's the thing. I mean, I came out of the communist country. I don't know if you knew this, but back in the 80s, Poland was a communist country, right?
Yeah.
So it's, the idea on how, we live. I mean, I lived in a 12 by 12 room, and that was everything too. Right. I mean, but it's one of those things that I think is really important to what you said earlier about, one, not forgetting your roots, where you came from. Because one, that created a big why for you, right? Because I think that is that why that drives you to success. That's one. And when you have that why that's strong enough for you, nothing, and I mean nothing, will stop you, right? No circumstances, no negative people or whatever it might be out there, no rejections. And I'm sure you've probably gotten rejections in your life. Nothing's going to stop you.
Absolutely.
Right. And the second thing that I've heard is creativity. I mean, I think it's really important because you guys, at an early age, you started asking yourself, how else?
Yeah.
You guys start asking this question of how else? How else can I get this accomplished? How else? How else? How else? And you don't let your mind just stay like this, right? You keep
going. Absolutely.
So let me ask you this, because here's the thing. You came from this place, right? And now you are a president and CEO of a bank, and you're successful. I mean, you've amassed a lot of success, been through a lot of different successful, opportunities. Some people might say that you got lucky, right? How would you answer that? What do you think is the reason for you to be successful? Except outside of what we just basically talked about, right? Because I mean, there's the driver, right? Because we talked about rejection a little bit, right? You've gotten probably a lot of rejections to get to where you want to be. So how did you come about to get to that point, do you think?
Yeah. So no, it's a very, very good question. Yes, I've had lots of rejections in my life. The first step is, when I got to college, I was here with my peer group, my roommates, etc. It would have been very easy to say, oh, I'm ashamed of doing certain things. I was very transparent with them about my roots and how I felt like just by stepping into a college environment, I felt like I had gone to heaven. You know what I mean? Because that would not have been possible for me in my native country, But so Messiah was good enough, and I never said to them, I'll do certain jobs or not. I never said to them, I'll only do office jobs, etc. While I was in college, I mopped the bathroom floors, cleaned the bathroom, etc. My roommate and other associates would come in and out while I was cleaning the bathrooms, etc. But I never took that as a struggle or anything like that. I knew that those are things I needed to do. I got out of college. Jobs were very difficult, and I was a busboy and a waiter and a cook on the 11 to 7 shift in a restaurant. But every step of the way, I always felt like I needed to apply myself because nothing was going to happen overnight. You needed to put your work in. But I always had this conviction that if I worked hard, treated people right, and applied myself, that things would be fine. You know what I mean? And pretty soon, I'll give you an example. I'm working this night shift at a restaurant, and it so happens that that's what got me my first job into banking. So I would work 11 to 7 shift, and at 7 in the morning, I would go home and I would look for banking jobs because I thought that that's where my calling was. And, I could never really open doors. And it so happened that the restaurant that I was working at, the manager of that restaurant, his best friend was the HR director at a bank. Okay. And they didn't know I was looking for it, but I happened to apply to this bank. And, at that time, that HR director just asked me, where do you work? And I said, I'm working in the night shift here. And so the first thing he did was he's calling his best friend who I'm working for at the
references
to say, what do you know about this guy? And, and the manager of the restaurant said to him, you got to hire this guy. And he said, why? There's something about him. He does, his disposition, his willingness to do whatever it takes, has a lot of humility, etc. But, some people may say, well, you got lucky that they knew each other. I don't say no, because if I hadn't worked hard, if I had a chip on my shoulder about my language, my background, working in a restaurant, maybe I would never have gotten positive endorsement, So what I would say is that, luck is about really applying yourself in every circumstance. I tell our employees all the time, treat everybody the right way because life goes in circles. One day, that you may be serving them. Another day, they may be serving you. So you need to make sure that you're always applying yourself in the most positive way because things do come around. You know what I mean? So you can call that luck. I call it, hard work and being opportunistic and applying certain values to everybody that you're with,
And I agree with you 100% on this because, one thing that I've heard over and over from you and from a lot of the immigrants that I interview here is who you are makes bigger, more important than anything else. Right. Because whether you're a single business owner, so you work for somebody, or you are Fortune 500, CEO, whoever it might be, who you are as a person, how you show up in the world, and how you internalize the outside world, right? Whether it's like, this world is here to help me get what I want, as opposed to this world is up against me,
Right.
that will make a bigger difference to being successful than anything else, whether it's talents, and we talked about talents before this show, right? Like people feel like, well, I'm not talented in this, or I'm not talented in that, or, I'm not very good at this. And how can I be successful? You know what I mean? But you do have talents as a person, you know? Talk a little bit about the talents, because I know you're very passionate about that, using your talents for, getting what you want in life kind of thing.
Right. So that is a very important, we always think in terms of talent as something tangible, and like I was a 2.2 cumulative GPA graduate, which is not, that's basically a C. Okay.
How are you CEO of a bank?
But the thing is, that some of the God-given talents are, in my early years, learning to be an entrepreneur, which was, how can I do this differently? What can I do differently, etc.
Right.
But talents also can be in the form of, having a humbling nature, a focused approach. I have the uncanny ability to really look at circumstances and to be able to condense them in very simple, here are the next 5 steps, and that's come in very handy as I lead groups of people, because, something doesn't go exactly the way they plan. People tend to freeze and kind of get flustered. I tend to just look at that. Okay, that's easy. Okay, it's not going that way, but let's take these next 5 steps. That's a talent. You know what I mean?
Yes.
A talent doesn't have to be in the form of a degree or a PhD, etc. It's the way you're wired in those things. And I talk about those things. For example, one of my talents is a boldness about big, audacious goals. You know what I mean?
Right.
I like to put myself out there, because I know that, I want to say we're going to take that hill, and God's given me the ability to have a persistent, focused nature to say, when I say something, I do it. That's a talent. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Not everybody has that. And so you've got to really spend some time trying to figure out what those talents are, tangible and not tangible, and be able to build yourself around those.
Right. Because I believe, you talked about God-given talents. I mean, I truly believe that God gives you certain talents, and there's a purpose for you in this life to actually achieve something, right? And that means that you need to get to know yourself well.
Right.
Get to know yourself, who you truly are, what are your talents, and I believe when you are talking about your talents that He's given you, I believe, because you're very convicted about that those are your talents, and you know that very well because of your experience, right?
Yeah.
And every single one of us has those talents. Now, one thing that you mentioned that I think is really important that I don't want to kind of gloss over is having the big, audacious goal. So one, what does that mean, right, to you? What does that mean to have a big, audacious goal to you?
Right. Yeah. For me, it is, it's to dream big. We are in a country of opportunities. I love America. I love America because you can do whatever you want. Just, it's up to you. Apply yourself, And so I've always taken the approach. A lot of people take the approach, well, you know what? I mean, I'll give you an example. It's sort of, it's like saying, well, I want to be VP of a company. Well, why limit yourself? Why not say, I want to be chairman of the company, and then have the confidence, the conviction to take the steps patiently to get there, to find the right mentors, the right coaches, and applying yourself to get there. And what I'm finding today is that people are more open to, let me take the safe bet. Let me stretch myself too much, and then you'll never discover what God has in plan for you. You know what I mean? Constantly hedging. So when I'll give you an example. When I wrote this book, I wanted it to speak to our young people, but people ask me, I said, so is that it? No, I said, no. I said, I wanted to speak to people, but I also want it to ultimately get to a point where people are asking me to come to the conventions, etc., to talk about some of the principles of the book, And they're like, oh, aren't you afraid you'll never get there? I said, no, I'm not, you know what I mean? Because I'm going to work hard to make sure that I take the steps to deliver on a big goal that I've set for myself, you know what I mean? And too many times I think we limit ourselves, especially as immigrants. Sometimes we think because of the language, because of the cultural issues, etc., that we can't do certain things. But we just have to remind ourselves, we are in a country, regardless of your background, your limitations, if you want to work hard, you can do whatever you want. The limitation is really yourself, you know what I mean?
Right. I agree. I mean, the only way that you're not going to succeed is with your own limiting beliefs that you put in place for yourself, because this is truly land of opportunity. It's funny because when I came here when I was 14, I used to joke around, and I've heard this as a joke that kind of got embodied in my head when I was little, that in the United States, money grows on trees.
Yep.
Right? And that's, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, I had that kind of an idea, right? And I'm like, that's silly, right? But the more I grow and the more, grow my business and have interactions with people like yourself, I come to find out and realize that money does grow on trees here. It's just, not literally, but the opportunity, right? You can literally go out there and grab that tree, sort of speak, that, you want to go after. And it is, and that's the beautiful thing about immigrants, because we have that mentality, like, this is an opportunity. It's a huge opportunity for me. I can really take that on. So I want to make sure that I respect your time. So I have one question for you here. I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot, and you can answer it or not because of your position. But what is your next big audacious goal?
My big audacious goal is to give you an idea. We had a company in Florida, a bank in Florida, that over 3 years we grew from basically nothing to about $1 billion, and was very successful. And we sold the bank. Okay, and so we sold it on January 1st, 2018, 12:01 a.m. was the closing, legal closing, okay? And 24 hours later, on January 2nd, 2018, I looked at my wife and I said, hon, I can't do this. And she said, what are you talking about? I said, we sold the bank and I have nothing to do. My calendar's open, etc. And she said, I kind of thought that's what would happen, So I sat back and said, what do I want to do next? I know I don't want to sit on the beach. I don't want to sit in Florida doing nothing. And it came to me, and God laid this on my heart. He said, listen, you have developed your skills the last 36 years in banking, not to put it on the shelf and do nothing with. What's on your heart? And I started feeling like what I wanted to do was, I've always run companies with the values of integrity, honesty, humility, serving others, etc. Who are the people that are going to carry on that legacy? And I felt like a lot of our young people were searching for, how do I run companies? How do I lead people, etc. And so I decided that the next bank I was going to do was going to be made up of a lot of young leaders who I was going to pour into them my values, my leadership style, and allow them and groom them to kind of run the next generation of banks well into the future. So my big goal is to develop as many next generation leaders who have values of integrity, honesty, etc., to run public companies as we go forward. In that process, and I'm doing it in the banking arena because that's what I know, is in that process, we can keep community banks alive with young leaders, because community banks at the end of the day are the heartbeat of our nation. They're the ones who provide capital to our small business owners, who then become successful entrepreneurs and employ people, produce products, etc. My big goal for the next 10 years is to generate and develop the next generation of community bank leaders who have certain values that they run their companies with.
Wow. I'm just, that's all I got to say is wow, because what I'm hearing from that is this is the catalyst that can actually transform the financial banking industry.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And I think that impact would be huge when it comes to, this country and all that kind of stuff, which go for it, man. I mean, if there's anything I can do to support you in that way, let me know, because I love, this is what I do, you know what I mean? Because I love people like you to be able to help them, impact them in some shape or form. So that is awesome. So let me go into my Polish Peter's final round. And my first question for you is, what is the book that you would recommend to our listeners?
I will tell you, one of the books that has had the most impact on me is a book that I have on my desk right here that I have very close. It's called The Way of the Shepherd. It's written by Dr. Kevin Lehman and Bill Pentak. And the book is about the 7 secrets of leading and managing productive people. It's a very simple read. You can read it in an hour, but it teaches you a lot about how to lead people. It's called The Way of the Shepherd.
Awesome. Very cool. And then there's your book, right? Now, do you want to say anything about that book?
Yeah, I will tell you that Our American Dream is a quick read. And I'll tell you, if you would just pick it up for 2 hours and just go through it and walk away with 1 or 2 key principles that apply to you, it would make, for example, I've gotten a lot of emails from people who said, Andrew, I've read your book. Here's one thing that really spoke to me, and that is I talk about how I get things done. I have my Sunday night list, and I ask and write what I'm going to do the next 7 days.
Yes.
And people say, why don't you use your handheld device and the notes section? And I always tell them it's not the same. When you write it down and then you cross it off one by one through the week as you finish it, as you put that list in your pocket, as you put that list on your desk, it has a totally different accountability than when it's on your iPhone, And so somebody said, Andrew, I'm going to apply that. That really spoke to me. Another person called and said, you talk about how you're a big sports fan, but you limit your time every day, about half hour, look at sports news on your iPhone. Because I realized if I looked at it throughout the day, there'd be a lot of wasted hours.
Right.
But I only do it once a day for about half an hour. And people say, how do you know all these stats about sports teams and all? And when I tell them it's half hour a day, because that's my time, they're surprised. But they're also surprised because they realize why I can get so much done during the day, because I don't get easily distracted.
Yep.
So, but this book, you don't need to apply all the principles. 1 or 2 principles will dramatically change your life, not just career-wise, but your family life, your relationships, etc.
Very cool. I love that. Yeah, and I agree with that because, one of I have a quote that I go by that I share with all my students, and it's by Tony Robbins. He said one time, where focus goes, energy flows. Yep. And that is so important because I think whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, you're doing this all the time. Yep. So, which leads me to another question for you. Do you have a quote that you go by any chance?
I wouldn't say, I have many quotes, what I mean? Big fan of quotes. There's nothing particular other than, the one thing that I heard all the time when I was growing up from my grandparents, etc., was just this whole idea of, we all say it, but do we really ever think about it? and that is treat others the way you want to be treated. We say it, but we've really stopped and think about what does that really mean? Do we? So when you're driving and somebody cuts you off, do you react to it, or do you immediately remind yourself that you know what? Maybe there's some circumstance in their life, and but don't beep at them and yell at them, etc. Because that's not the way you'd want to be treated if you were running to a hospital because of an emergency or something. So that's one that I've used a lot, but I think it has more to do with because it was shared with me from my grandparents, etc. And a lot of times we throw it out there, but we really believe it.
Right. Yeah. I think that's awesome. But the important thing to remember about this, and I can see it from you that you're doing that, is when you talk about treating others the way you want to be treated, it's not just treating people that you like, right? Yeah, it's about treating everybody, people that you don't like, right?
That's right.
People who have different opinions than you do.
That's right.
That kind of stuff. All right. Awesome. So listen, my next question for you is one thing because here's the thing, one of the greatest things that I can do here on this particular podcast when I interview these immigrants from different countries is to ask them about their own country. Yeah. So what's the one thing that you would want to share about your own country? Maybe it's a custom, maybe it's a saying, anything that normally we wouldn't know about.
Right. So one thing I would say that is a big, big factor, as a country, where people are more and more lonely. They feel lonely. They feel alone, Mm-hmm. One thing that I will share about India and Indian culture is it's such an extended family system where, you take care of the extended family. You take care of brothers and sisters. You take care of nieces, nephews, etc. And so there's never an opportunity where somebody feels alone because they're always surrounded by, I'll give you an example. When I was growing up, my father was not my only father. My mother had 4 brothers. And so my father was my father. Her brothers were my little fathers. My dad had brothers who were older than him, so they were my big fathers. So guess what? When I was disciplined, when I was coached and everything, I never felt like, even though my dad was in the military and away and gone for 11 months out of the year, mm-hmm. I never felt like my father wasn't around because I had my little fathers and my big fathers around. You know what I mean? Yep. So I never felt that loneliness. So there was a sense of community and comfort and security and all of that. You know what I mean? And that's something I'll tell you. And that's not just unique to India. There are other countries that have that culture. We need more of that. We need families to be more closer and tighter because it does give our children a sense of security and belonging.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great piece of advice because it's so important in today's world, especially, right?
That's right.
My next question for you is, you mentioned sports.
Yes.
Just a fun question. What kind of sports are we talking about here?
I'm a big, big soccer fan. Football.
Yes.
Yes.
Who's your soccer team?
Oh, well, my favorite player is Lewandowski.
You are speaking my language, my man. Seriously. He is one of the most underrated players in the world. I mean, he's my guy.
Yeah, wow. I just saw him play 2 weeks ago. And when you talk about the best center forward in the world today, Robert Lewandowski is the best center forward. The size, the speed, the agility, the vision. And I'm not just saying this, because you're Polish. I just saw him 2 weeks ago, and I just think he is your prototype striker, center forward. That a lot of young people who say, "I'm going to be a striker." That's who I want to emulate.
Awesome, very cool. Yeah, and for those of you,
the team is Arsenal, which is a Premier League club out of London. I've been an Arsenal fan for 50 years. That's my team.
Wow. All right. I can live with that. Arsenal is a good, I can live with that. When I was growing up, in Poland, the one that I would watch, there was FC Barcelona playing Real Madrid. That was the big, rivalry that was always looking at. So, yeah. But for those of you who don't know, Lewandowski is a Polish soccer star. And it's one of those things that we were very proud of, in the past so many years because he is unbelievable. So, all right. So listen, you've shared a lot of gold on this particular call. You allow great insights and strategies and tips and all that kind of stuff. If you could maybe somehow tie into this bowl, what would you want to leave the listener with in order for them to listen, I'm striving to be successful in this world. One last piece of advice that you would give them.
Yeah. What I would say is, you are in the land of opportunity. And I would say, apply yourself, be patient, one day at a time. Don't expect things to just happen overnight. You know what I mean? But you've got to apply yourself day in and day out. And that's the big thing I would say is, just, go out and apply yourself and use your God-given talent, and the opportunities will open up,
Right. Awesome. Listen, one last question. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, how would they reach out to you?
They can reach out to me. They can connect with me on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And they can feel free to reach out to me any of those avenues. And, I'm happy to connect with folks.
All right. Very cool. So listen, Andrew, thank you so much. I'm going to put those links in the notes so people have the ability to reach out if they want to. Thank you so much for giving us this hour and sharing your life and successes and, struggles. I mean, I can't imagine the cow dung story just blows my mind. And I'm sure I'm not the only one, but it is who you are. And that's what made you so successful, because that is part of your story. And that is the reason I think why you're so successful in today's world. So I'm sure this has helped someone on this call. It has really had a good impact on me, because seeing, another story, successful story gives me an opportunity to see how powerful we are as human beings and what this country does for people. For you listener, if you found this podcast anywhere on the world, make sure you go to mastersunite.com. That's mastersunite.com. That's where you're going to find all of the episodes. Leave a feedback. If you find me, I'm on Facebook, Polish Peter. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. Reach out to me. If you're an immigrant, reach out to me. Maybe we'll have you on this particular podcast, because I think, as you can see, there are some powerful people in this world, and I want to share those stories. So, Andrew, thank you so much for being on this particular podcast, and I cannot wait to see what comes next for you.
Thank you, Peter. Have a great day.
You too.